Hey, what we're talking about today is how to get the best from business partnerships. So, hey, this will be helpful in a few situations. If you're currently in a family situation, whether it's like husband, wives, whether your partner's significant others type thing, be pretty handy there. Whether you're looking to make it happen or whether it's already in effect. Maybe you're mates, maybe you worked for the same company or you knew each other from the same town. Maybe it was even at different companies, whether you came up as apprentices together or you knew each other as tradesmen, whatever. Maybe your current business partner's already, maybe you're looking to add a business partner, or maybe it's something like if you have a key guy that you're thinking about how to offer a piece of the pie, or you're thinking about that as a potential option, or maybe even you want to put it as a carrot to somebody who you might want to recruit. So there's a few situations where I think this could be really, really helpful. So I'd love to dive into obviously some things we need to look at, some things we need to do to make sure that we're across it, we're comfortable, and we're setting ourselves up for the best results. So, but I'd love to just kick it off with a question, team. What's your current situation right now? What's your situation? Are you in a partnership or not? Are you looking to be in one? So let's chat about some problems if we don't set this up right, or maybe if you don't even look at the possibility of getting a partner involved. So I guess the first thing is sometimes running a business on your own can feel just plain lonely, right? No one to bounce ideas off, no one to pump you up, no one to play that devil's advocate when you're trying to push ideas out. Sometimes when you push ideas out, you can think your own idea is the absolute best, but sometimes it isn't. So sometimes you need somebody to call you on that stuff, right? Maybe it's no one that understands the true challenges or the emotional roller coaster that we go on. Maybe it's the feeling of being unappreciated by clients and staff, no one to share that with as well. Maybe you're short on skills. Right? Maybe you're really great at one part of the business, but you're not so good at other parts. So an example of that might be you're really great as a relationship builder. You can connect with people really well, or maybe you have really, really killer ideas. You're really creative, but you struggle with implementing those ideas or making them real, or you struggle with the organizational side of things. You're not very good at scheduling. You're not very good at making sure the stock arrives on time, and all of that sort of stuff can slip by the wayside, which can cause some chaos. Maybe it's the flip side. You're really good, you're a doer, you're an implementer, you get heaps done, but you struggle with the creativity of thinking about how you could implement something into your business and the creative side of things. Maybe you've run out of steam. The nights, the weekends, they've just started to add up and you tend to lose motivation. You lose the energy, you lose the focus, and sometimes it can feel like things are just a little bit too much. Or perhaps you actually already have a partnership going and you feel frustrated, and it can feel like you're trapped in this bad relationship, or it's exactly like that actually. You're trapped in this bad relationship and maybe like it's causing some friction with your wife, your significant other. But if you nail this, there's a huge opportunity here. Right? Improving your partnership or that opportunity to get into a partnership can be massive. And I'm a huge believer that if you get this right and you set it up well and you review it and you make sure you keep growing it, it can be absolutely killer to growing a successful business. So the first thing here is you can feel a lot more supported. Like the old saying goes, a problem shared is a problem halved. And you're with somebody else who fully understands the challenges of running a business. You know what projects and business improvement activities to focus on and at what time, and you can focus your energy and it leads to better and faster implementation. And the business can actually continue running even if one of you guys goes away for a long weekend, a week, or even longer. And the next is the ability to have a bigger plethora of skills. Who's watched the movie Moneyball before? But really, it's a story about this guy, Billy Beane. He was an ex-Major League Baseball player, and this guy, Peter Brand, who changed the way they approached the draft. So they buy players. If you're not familiar with, I don't know, NFL, basketball, baseball, kind of similar in this way. But they had a limited budget, and they changed their way that they approached how they purchased players or approached the draft. So they were representing the Oakland Athletics. And really, they were struggling to compete against the bigger teams, so like the Red Sox, the Yankees, and other big teams. And they didn't have the coin to go and just purchase the ones that the scouts were like eyeing up as the next big players. And so Billy, being the player, like the professional, the sports person, the people guy, the motivator, and a manager, like he found this guy, Peter, who was an economics graduate, and he's like a massive numbers guy, and he had these radical ideas about how to evaluate players, which is much different to the subjective analysis of play style, the normal means by which the main scouts were picking people. So he would pick them by stats, and he had these equations that considered things like their hits, their walks, their bases, and he'd put them into an equation and then assess them based on their ability in that way. And what they did was they began to sign undervalued players and do some controversial trades, and actually led to like their lead scout ended up leaving. A bunch of other stuff happened, but they actually landed the next year the West League title. So really what this is all about is one guy had to find another guy to complement his skill set so they could go and take this business, because it is a business, to the next level, and to be able to compete at a scale where they could with the budget that they had. And Billy was actually offered after that a Red Sox contract for like 12 point something million dollars. Back in those days, massive coin. I think he would have been like the highest paid general manager in the league. But really what this is we're looking for someone that has skills to complement us, right? Like who's the current Billy Bean to your Peter brand? So for example, we got Adam Grice in the house. Maybe he's an awesome entrepreneur, right? He thinks outside the box. And then if we think about someone like a Graydon, maybe he's like the get it done guy. He's the one that sticks everything together like glue. What I'm going for here is that we've got to find somebody who complements that skill set and who is going to add that value to you. And then, you got to think about it as bigger and better. We can create this thing and we can scale it. And sometimes the sum of a whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? Nice little Aristotle quote for you. We get some synergies out of being a team that honestly just don't happen when you're alone and playing at it by yourself. There's 5 keys that I wanted to talk about with these before we dive into the meat and the guts of what we're going to do today. The first one is, hey, it's better to be miserable alone. I'm a great believer in business partners, and I've seen them work brilliantly well, right? But you look at the image that's up on screen right now, they're butt to butt, right? And like any relationship, it's better to be miserable alone than miserable together. They're absolutely not for everyone, and they're not for every situation under the sun. If you think about some people, high Ds are a really good example of this. Control freaks are the people who want to own absolutely everything and don't want anybody to really either know what's going on or have control in the business. Hey, it might not work, right? It may be better that that person isn't in a partnership. Or if someone in the partnership is doing it under duress, it's probably not the best thing for either side of that situation as well. So one example of what not to do is, got an example of some ex-members who went through a phase. Let's just call them Rob and Mary, just for this example. But Mary helped Rob out as he needed some help in the business. He was pretty stressed out. And so she was helping out, and I'm sure you guessed it, she's in the office, and she's running the accounts, and she's making sure the invoicing is done. But honestly, she's just not really that keen on it. And she's seeing what Rob's doing with the pricing and the margins and with the team. She's expressing concern and not really being able to do that much because of her role and her experience within the trade. And it actually caused quite a bit of tension within their relationship at work. And that actually dragged home as well. And honestly, she hated it. It was an absolute disaster. And it impacted their relationship quite badly. And they had to get some outside help, and it made things way better. But it needs to work inside the business to work outside the business as well. The second one here is 2 heads are better than 1, right? There is a definite synergy that a partnership can bring to the business on many levels, right? The first one is the emotional and the mental side of things, right? Staying focused and not being overwhelmed and feeling that support that you have there with you is so important, and it can be so helpful and useful to you being able to bring out your full self, that creative side, the big implementer side, the skill set that you have that when you're in the weeds, you can't do too much of, right? That person can be there to pick up that mental slack if you're not in a great space. And then on the practical side of things, it can be much easier to have holidays. It can be much easier to get away from the business for a few days or a week. except sometimes possibly the husband and wife setup, but we'll talk about that a little bit later in the session. But the third thing is it actually helps you cover more ground in terms of brain space. So two people are thinking about the idea that you want to do. Two people are tackling the problem that we currently have, or more. But more brains can definitely be better in a situation where you're trying to solve something and we've got the same purpose going into it. We want the same outcome coming out of it. And the third one is mutual benefit. So for a partnership to work, there absolutely must be mutual benefit. So must give both parties that benefit, right? So some people, they get a partner because maybe they're scared of losing an employee, or because they're desperately in some need of some sort of help. So that's where, in some cases, we get the wife or the partner or the friend into the business to help out. And sometimes we can not think about how much that might impact the other person, right? Is it actually the best option? A business partnership with your spouse, like I said before, it's hey, it's only going to make the relationship more of what it currently already is. So if you have a great relationship and you both actually want to be involved, it will probably improve your relationship. But if there are a few issues or challenges going on already, and you put the added pressure of a business partnership on top of that, it can have an effect that you don't really want it to. So it's really important that there's a lot of honesty and transparency before you set that up, or even while it's set up if it's not working. And then, oh, sorry, I kind of missed that. The next one is, hey, it's with a business partner here, it can no longer just be about you. So your business has to become a separate entity from yourself. So things like keeping score, financial management, that stuff becomes absolutely crucial. And you can no longer use the business bank account as a personal or a private bank. You can't just take those drawings out whenever you want to buy a new ute, or whenever you want to make an investment, or whenever you want to take money out because things at home just aren't so easy. It becomes a little bit different, and we've got to think about that and look after those financials at a different level. So you've got to do things like pay your wife. If your wife or your spouse is doing a job inside the business, pay them a proper wage for the work that they do. And the transparency helps us see that the business is running as it should be. We get that actual feedback from the business without us sort of dipping and choosing when we want to take money out of it. And the last one here is, hey, it's business, right? Partnerships that succeed, like any business, require us to be more professional. And it does link in with transparency. So really there are three roles here. The first one is the director. And that person's job is to set the strategy of the business. Second one is a shareholder, and the shareholder's the owner. They've got a stake, they've got that skin in the game there. And the third one is an employee. So they do the work, they do the implementation to get the results. So most of us in here, we're going to have 1, 2, or 3 of these roles currently. So the shareholders, they've put that money, or maybe even their sweat equity, into the business already. So they want a return on the investment that they've put in. The directors, they figure out what the strategy is to best get that return on the investment. And then the employees, they implement the strategy to get that return. And the key thing here is that as a shareholder, you may have multiple roles. So you'll want a return, but you may also be an employee, and you may take a wage from the business, wage or salary, whatever, as well. And having a partnership should have the goal of improving your and the other person's results. So that shouldn't just be financial results. It should be time, should be stress, should be emotional results. And you don't just do it because it sounds fun. All right. Really, the first part here is, but what we're doing here is we're laying any groundwork that we want, because one reason why partnerships don't work out super hot is because, hey, they weren't set up right. The second part that we want to do is we want to focus on what happens during the process. So that's the grow part of this. And this is how we get the most out of it while it's alive and while you're working together within the partnership. And then the third part is about harvesting. So this is all around our exit strategy, and this is how we plan for exiting the business. So when it's time to finish up, we've done the right stuff to harvest the most amount out of the business. So that could be if you want to set it up as a passive income. That could be if you're wanting to sell the business. That should also be super aligned with the rest of the guys in your partnership as well. So let's dive into each of those a little bit more. The 5 Ps apply here really well. So prior planning, prevents poor performance. So without a solid foundation, you could often create problems. And with the pressures and the stresses of business, and honestly general life, if you're in a husband and wife scenario, the cracks can often turn into those giant holes. And often the problems start before the partnership kicks off. So it's about getting it right from the get-go. I got 3 major points that I think will help you sow the seeds and set you up for success. So, hey, if you're already in a partnership and you haven't done some of this stuff, you can absolutely go back and sort some of these things out. But we're focusing on the left-hand side here on the workbook. So the first one is vision and values. So one of the biggest causes of a relationship breakdown is a difference in vision or a difference in your value set, like what you stand for. So even think about it in the ultimate partnership, right? When you get married to somebody, it's probably not something you think about, but it's really crucial for that long-term success that you stand for similar things, that you have similar values, and hey, that you're looking to achieve some similar stuff, get the same sort of stuff out of life. And when you're getting into a business partnership, is the vision that you have for your business and for your life similar to the other person, and do your values align? Or is there some sort of like ambiance there that you can work with? And if you think about values, thinking about things like tolerance for risk, maybe it's spending habits, maybe it's your attitude to learning and upskilling and grabbing some extra knowledge to implement new stuff into your business. Maybe it's even things like political leanings, right? Values are about having a similar outlook on life. That's kind of the easiest way you can sum it up. And sometimes it can be pretty hard to think about how these stack up with somebody. So there's some practical stuff that you can do with this to really align it. The best part of it's obviously to have a conversation. But I chucked a little exercise together 2 pages on in the workbook. I've already written half this stuff because I kind of knew this was going to be an issue. But what I want us to do is jump to page 10. And I want you to just spend 2 minutes on this values check page, just thinking about how your values stack up for you. Let's just go through what these look like for you. So if you think about profit, what are you looking for? What do you want to take out of the business each year? Right? Are you looking for as much profit as possible? Do you have a sort of conservative view of, hey, I'm keen for 300 grand and that's kind of my limit. I don't really want to push further than that, or I'm not interested in pushing further than that. When it comes to time, are you somebody that's happy to sink 7 days a week into your business? Doesn't matter, right? If I play out this scenario, I'm absolutely the person that doesn't have a wife or a kid or any kids. And so I'm good. I just want to throw everything into the business because I want $500,000 or more out of this thing every single year after I pay myself. Right? What's my tolerance for risk? Honestly, I'm only going to spend the money on things that I absolutely need to be spent on. Like if I don't need to spend money on it, I'm not going to spend money on it. What's my role going to be in the business? I'm a GM. You can be whatever you want as long as it's not a GM. I'm running the show. All right. What's my growth strategy? Pretty conservative. Kind of doesn't line up, but pretty conservative in this case. What sort of decision power do I have to have in this partnership? I absolutely want to look after the expenses. I want to control how the money's spent in the business. And I want to have say about when we hire, who we hire, when we fire, how we performance manage. What sort of use of money am I happy to do? Like, honestly, I just want to save all the money. I've already implemented profit first. I'm going to put everything into its own accounts. And yeah, I want to save as much as I can. And then what do I want it to exit? How do I want it to exit? I want to set this thing up so that somebody else can take over and it considers a passive income until I die. I want to retire at 50. I want to have nothing to do with it, but I still want it to make as much money as possible, and I'll sink as much time as I need into it right now. So hopefully you're going through this. Some of these are actually tougher than others. You might think, oh, I'm all right, like somebody else could come in and have all the decision power, but honestly, what do you absolutely need control over? Think about your situation right now. If somebody else was to come and make decisions for you, what would you not be okay with? Look, the next thing for us here is skills. So really, do you have a complementary skill set? So we didn't talk about that just before, but it's another piece of the puzzle here, right? If you both love pain and you like to do all of the pricing work, is that going to work? If you both want to spend all of your time doing the same thing, is that actually going to work, right? So a great combination is one person could be the extrovert, who's the relationship builder, the networker, the go-getter. And then on the other hand, you have the introvert, who maybe is better at planning, organizing, scheduling things, and keeps the fires put out. And that kind of creates that yin and the yang. And that's what we're looking for a lot of the time. So a great question is, do the wives, the husbands have the skills, or hey, the ability to learn the skills that are required for their role if they're coming into the business? So that might be admin, that might be marketing. And sometimes and honestly, this is a generalization, but we see wives that are given the hospital pass as they don't have the skills or the inclination to do what's needed to do. And the third one is skin in the game. So this is quite an important one, right? As a husband and wife, when we think about it, generally you both have the financial skin in the game anyway. But for non-family, for a partnership, you need people to have some sort of contribution financially, right? Some way that the shares that they have, they've bought in with those with money. And this helps really change the dynamic from that employee to a shareholder. So they need to get the capital together to actually purchase those shares. Sometimes you could initially figure out something to fund some of that cost by buying in from the profits, but I strongly suggest some sort of cash contribution right off the get-go. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Like I said, it really shifts the dynamic. It shifts the actual mindset, an employee to a shareholder mindset. It actually makes a big difference to how people, one, think about their business and those decisions, and two, the impact that they have and the impact that all roles have. So they have in their role and that all roles have on the actual outcomes of the business. And then the second thing is it actually qualifies people. The right person that you'd probably want to dive into business with should actually be in a pretty good financial position to make some sort of cash contribution. If they're not, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a deal breaker, but it might raise some questions just around their financial intelligence and what they do with their money. Plus, hey, if you offer some sort of partnership, it could be a carrot as a hire, then it's a great idea to have that as an option that could be exercised. But hey, after a period of time is probably a pretty safe bet so that they can prove satisfactory performance. I'd say more than 90 days. That way you can learn a lot more about their vision, their values, their skills, and their fit to work with you as a partner. And just a couple of things to kind of bank off that one is we've got to do our due diligence, right? We've got to get our detective hat on and we've got to do that detective work. And if you think about that in a business partner situation, you should check out things like their relationship and their family status, right? Like let's just say, for example, there's a divorce in the mix. That could actually have a massive impact on your business in terms of things like forcing a sale, if there needs to be change of assets and things like that. You probably want to check out their financial health if you're bringing a partner in as well. So things like past debts, issues, that sort of thing. And if you're buying into a business, right, like what's the health of that business? What sort of debt does it have? What sort of past profits does it have? What sort of issues are underlying there? You probably don't want to figure it out as you go, because you could leave some things on the table that when an issue crops up, they're much harder to actually deal with. And I'll get to that in a little second. But what you want to look at is things like the debts, the profits, the issues, and the stability along there. And so your accountant should be doing that. And I have a little story just for a second around this and around the due diligence that honestly, if you miss it, you could really shit the bed. One of my friends bought a digital marketing company last year, and what they found out during the purchase process is that this guy actually owned this one business and he owned two other businesses as well that were like a part of a big franchise network. And what was happening is this guy was like cycling money through the digital marketing company to earn franchise bonuses. And the way that they figured it out was no linking of purchase orders to actual jobs for the money that was going through the business. So inflated sales and inflated profits, and obviously that attempts to inflate the purchase price, and it's hella dodgy. right? So you want to make sure you do big due diligence when it comes to checking out the business if you're buying into anything like that as well. And the last thing around sowing the seeds is we've got to do the paperwork. Like, it's absolutely crucial that all aspects on the legal side of the partnership are fully written down in a shareholders agreement prior to kicking off the partnership, and have this locked down. Like, this is kind of like the rule book for how the partnership will be conducted from a legal and a financial standpoint. So this is where you have to have the hard conversations up front. So how are we going to do the profit sharing, and when is money going to be taken out of the business? What's the process for like valuing and selling shares? What happens if there's, God forbid, a death of one of the shareholders, right? How do we handle disputes? So you should get a lawyer involved, and you have the hard conversations right at the start. And then what you can do is you can grab the paperwork, you can put in the drawer, and honestly, you'll most likely not need it, but it's important that you have it there just in case. The next piece here that we're talking about is grow. So once you're set up and the partnership is operating, how to grow the partnership so that it delivers the best results money-wise, time-wise, lifestyle-wise, really important. So funnily enough, this is exactly the same as what it takes to run a successful business without a business partner. Things like accountabilities, hiring, firing, setting up systems, learning, all the same stuff. But I reckon it's even more important with partners. So there are a few things that are quite important here. Now, the first one is this thing called communication. So there's a few things that come into that, right? Rhythms, rules, values. This is huge. And you should have regular shareholders meetings. And that's to ensure that the business is continuing to deliver what the shareholders want, and to ensure that you're keeping the channels open. So I'd honestly recommend like monthly as an absolute minimum. Second piece of this is honesty. Short-term pain is with paying to avoid long-term relationship breakdowns. So you got to have the hard combos when you need to. Tony always talks about the two sins here. One is the sins of commission. That's when you do something and you need to own up to it. And the second one is sins of omission, which is you don't do or you don't say what you should. Right? It needs to be said, and you're doing a disservice to the other shareholders if you don't, right? So it's really important there. And then having clear rules is also really important as well. And so for most business partnerships, you also have that role as an employee. As I mentioned before, this is a separate role to the shareholder. So important that you have clear job descriptions about who does what and who's responsible for what, KPIs that define what success looks like for each role, weekly checklists to ensure all the tasks are getting done, the normal stuff, right? And so something that's really key here is that clarity comes through like a task analysis or getting that JD real crystal clear. So I won't go into this in mega depth, but a couple of pages down there is on page 12, I think it is, there's a task analysis for a business owner. You should absolutely get every single task that needs to be done off the tools in your business. Use this as a starting point, get it up on a big piece of paper, and start highlighting who you want to own what job. So a lot of you guys will have done this already in some aspect. Maybe it was your role in clearing up some sort of office manager or office admin or estimator or ops manager, getting really clear on what the roles are. You want your roles as the shareholders, directors, owners of the business to be super clear as well. And you want clear rules around what that looks like and how that flows down to your salaries as well. And that's really important because normally your wages will be based on the role that you do. So great example is like a GM would most often be paid more than an operations manager. Do we all agree with that? Give us a thumbs up if you do. I'm sure all of us do, right? So that's the wage that you take out of the business, but then you're sharing the profit based on how much you own of the company. I've got a pretty good example of what not to do. I won't call them out because they're cleaning this up at the moment, but we have a member that owns a electrical business, and the founder owns 50% of the shares. Founder's wife owns 5% of the shares, who also works in the business, doing the admin stuff. The founder holds the GM role. And then they had a really good industrial sparky that was working for them. They wanted to hook them in. And he ended up buying 45% of the company. So he's got 45% stake in the business. And the way that they set this up is the founder and the industrial sparky both take the same salary, and then they get their 50% and their 45%. But I'm sure you guys can calculate in your head that the GM is probably doing much different stuff to the industrial Sparky, who's just going to do the work on the tools, right? And they're kind of worth different things. And if you set it up like that, and then you have the awkward conversation later, it's pretty tough. So you want to make sure that that conversation around salaries is done right off the bat. And these things can change as your role changes, but it feels kind of off, right? And so if you want to dive into this a little bit deeper, there's a really good webinar to watch called The Productivity Myth. You can find that under the March 2020 bootcamp. So if you're all about wanting to get that role clarity and that's something you need to work on, then go and watch that webinar. It's real killer. The last thing here is around values. Around values, we've got to continue to look at this. We've got to continue to revise these as circumstances change, family, financials, interest, stage of life, succession, things like that. It's really important that we're continuing to talk about that stuff as well. Second piece here is, hey, we've got to hold a united front. Oh my God, this iPad. We've got to hold a united front, right? It's really important that people aren't playing off mum versus dad and pitting you guys against each other, right? It's absolutely fine to disagree about something, but I think it's really important that you do it behind closed doors, right? Stick together and hold that united front so that they don't play you off against each other and they don't bag one of the two in front of the other. Really important. And the other one is, hey, there should be a single commander, right? One boss. And unity of command is like a basic management principle, right? One person who's ultimately responsible. If there's two or there's three, things can easily fall through the cracks, right? The team can be a little bit unsure of who to go to. One person can think the other has got something covered or vice versa, and then the thing just doesn't happen. So it's really good to have somebody that sits in that GM role, or someone that can be at least the face of the operation. So the face of who deals with the communications with the team, maybe who deals with clients as well. And you guys can all get together and make the decisions, and you should, but just having that one person who looks after the team and looks after the clients as the single face. And that could obviously change later on down the track as well. And then our last one here is harvest. So there's three things here as well. I think the first thing is we've got to play by the rules. So discuss the options in that rule book right at the start. Hey, do we want a buyout? Right at the end. If that happens, is it market price or is there some pre-existing agreement there? Does that party have to sell back to the primary shareholders or current shareholders, or is external okay? We should talk about that stuff. The second one is, what is the exit strategy? Right, how much time are we looking to spend in the business together before we exit? Do we all want to retire at the same age? Do we want to sell before then? Do we want this to be a passive income once we retire so we can keep getting the money, but we don't want any involvement? What does the succession plan look like internally? Or how are we getting other people in to come into the business to take over? Right, so we've got to be clear on what that looks like. And the third thing here is we should have annual reviews. So we probably need to rehash, like, what does our vision look like? Has that changed? Are we still working towards the same thing? Values in the business, internal growth inside the business, interests, financials, family. We should be talking about that stuff pretty regularly. Is that making sense, team? Can I grab a thumbs up if that's landing? All right, love it. Couple more things here. Just want to talk about husband and wives. Hey, there's a huge volume of husbands and wives or significant other type partnerships on the program, and I know this is really important. And I think there's a few tips here that will help you to be able to segregate it and separate that relationship and make it work as well as possible. I think the first thing is, hey, try to have an office that's outside of home if you can. Right? Something where you have to drive to is really good for that mind shift. And hey, I'm not at home anymore, I'm at work, and my state actually can change. So the physical action of coming home can actually be huge. It can make me feel like now I'm in personal life instead of work life. But if you can't get a separate office, 100% like make it outside the living area. Super, super important there. One question to ask is, we talked about this before, but like, is one party in that partnership currently under duress, right? Example of that is if the wife's not that keen and the husband just needs help, now that can be okay short term, but it's probably not the best long term. And I can actually think of some of you guys that are on this call right now that we probably need to talk about that and ask that question, right? What is the long-term approach here, right? It can create resentment, which honestly isn't going to flow back to home life very well. So it's worth asking the question, is it better to get somebody else? I'm not calling anyone out here, but I just know that there's some. The right skills are really crucial. If you're married to somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person has the right skills. It's really important that you're super honest about that. The next one here is probably the biggest. Hey, it's capacity, right? So often, another generalization, it is the wives that help in the office. And often that may mean that they have other responsibilities and they've come in to help, right? Maybe they have another job. Does that person have time or other responsibilities around family, right? Having a family is super time hungry, right? If you're thinking about sick days, that's normal, but then school holidays on top of it, if that person's not going to be in the business for every school holidays, it's like 25% of the year. It's a huge amount of time out of the business where that person can't be helping you with the things that need to be done. And honestly, that kind of sucks on both sides, because if work's piling up, hey, the person that's responsible for it, if that's the wife, she's probably going to be pretty damn stressed and probably frustrated that there isn't enough time to actually keep up and be on top of things. And then the other person in the relationship is probably going to get more stressed and more frustrated as they don't feel like they have that support there and things aren't happening quite like they thought they would. So it can create a bit of a situation that isn't so hot and it can carry home. Sometimes it feels like the easy option, but is it the best option? Probably worth asking. And it's really important that we be honest about that capacity to do the job, right? Having enough help in the office is absolutely killer. And most people that come on the program need that at some stage pretty damn quickly. And we've got to think about it, right? Like the number one in business is always a bad number, right? One supplier, one main client, one main tradie that you rely on. If that person, the wife or the significant other, is the key person in the office and you're the key operations person, what happens when you want to have a holiday together? Does the business fall to bits? It has that double whammy effect that we probably want to avoid. Right? But if it is right, you can separate work from home. Maybe both of you are working, maybe even on the business. I see that quite a lot as well. And maybe the roles are separated in the right way and there's some extra support in the office. It can absolutely work brilliantly. And I can look at a few here that I know hold a really, really good work and home life in partnership together. So definitely know it can work. Catch you all pretty soon.